Today let us study the Jati Panchaya Sutta, chapter 5 of SD 39. It is SD 39.5. Jati Panchaya Sutta. The original title is simply Panchaya Sutta. The number of Panchaya Sutta, so here we add the prefix to it, Jati, because the sutta deals with Jati. In fact, the sutta also begins with Jati and the link up with decay and death. In Pali, Jati comes first, but when you translate in English, you have the last link of the 12 link coming first. So this sutta, the discourse on conditions, brackets birth or beginning with birth, as 12.20 is about the 12 links. It's about the universality of the 12 links. In simpler terms, one way of looking at how everything in this world function, our minds, our bodies, everything around us, we can use the word conditionality, conditions. There are two words here, causes, conditions. A cause is something that leads to another event immediately. So in a sense, in Buddhist psychology and Buddhist teachings, such things are not really, this kind of causes and effect, single cause, single effect doesn't really exist. There are many causes, many effects. In other words, it's more meaningful to talk of conditions. For example, if you talk about, let's say, a fruit tree, a mango tree, we say, yes, we plant a seed and then the mango tree grows. That is just a manner of talking. There are so many attending conditions that are necessary. You should not only have the seed must be at the right time, it must be viable, and then you plant it in the soil which is rich enough, which can support the seed, and then there is enough water, sunlight, heat, and so on. The right conditions, and then this plant grows, assuming nobody cuts it down, a lawnmower doesn't cut it down, or some cattle step on it and so on. So there are many, many conditions, and this plant grows, and at the right time, it fruits. Right, so many, many conditions work together to produce many results. And this is something which is very important for us to remember. Here, this conditionality is applied universally. And we are reminded that whether there are Buddhas or not, whether Buddhas arise in the world or not, this is a universal truth. And this teaching is very interesting because we have this idea of a universal truth independent of the Buddha. But it is the Buddha who comes into this world and declares it to us for our benefit, points out to us so that we understand this. In other words, all these natural causes and effects, this conditionality, are always there. It's just that we don't notice them. So when we don't notice them, then we start blaming a single cause, looking at the single effect. Take for example, somebody gets upset, let's say I'm upset, and I say, okay, A is causing me upset. Why? Because this person did something or didn't do something. It is in terms of talking, but if you really examine more deeply, you find the fact that I can get angry or have fear or am worried, any kind of emotional state or lack of emotional state, there are many conditions attending to this propensity, this tendency I have. In other words, I'm like a wick, candle wick, waiting to be lit, so to speak, something like that. And then those conditions, again, it's not just a single condition, it could be many other conditions that led to that particular condition. For example, let's say someone didn't do his work well, okay, then I get very upset. But then there are many reasons why this person didn't spoke well. So we could actually point out any of those conditions. So we examine our problems, we can call it suffering if you like. You find that there are many causes, many conditions. So you can't blame any one of them, but you've got to study them and then see, okay, where's the best place to change? The best place to change actually is our own minds. For example, how we look at the situation, we understand the nature of conditionality, then we begin to have more compassion. We begin to have more wisdom. We say, oh, this is nobody's fault. There's many causes and conditions working together. So let us understand this. Of course, this doesn't mean that we just take things laissez-faire, we just don't bother. We can change things after we've understood the nature of causes and conditions, the nature of conditionality. So the Buddha comes into this world and explains to us in great detail, again and again, the nature of conditionality, which is very helpful to us. So here there are some interesting terms used. Well, before talking about terms, the 12 links or the dependent arising here is given in reverse. Normally it starts with ignorance and it ends with all kinds of suffering, decay and death. But here it begins with birth. It begins with birth, incarnation, leading to decay and death. And then it goes kind of backwards. It goes reverse. Although it goes reverse back to ignorance, it is not talking about the ending of ignorance. It's still talking about how all this conditionality work together to bring us suffering. So in other words, we start with present condition. What's going on now around us? There's suffering, decay and death, right? Or the fact that we are born, jati and so on. So in a moment we look at all this, the links, I'm giving a bit of introduction at this point. So we have this interesting term called dhatu, element. Dhatu here translates element. The word dhatu is actually quite a common word, so we have to see the context. We cannot translate each Pali word as only one meaning. You've got to see the context. So here, dhatu or element translates as principle. Principle. You might even say a kind of law, if you like, in a very broad sense of the word. And the sense of principle here is at least two. One is it is natural. Nobody invented it. It's there. It's the way of the world. And secondly, it's universal. It's found everywhere, throughout the universe. So this is something very natural about Buddhism. Buddhism talks about what you see is what you get, so to speak. All around us, there is this conditionality. Elsewhere, we have studied what are called the commentarial list of 5 kinds of natural orders, pancha niyama. This is on page 99, section 1.1.2.3. This is called the order of things. In other words, although we talk about conditionality, we also must remember not everything is due to karma. There is first the order of heat and energy, utu niyama, or what today we call the law of physics. Right? In other words, for example, when you drop this how things move, how let's say you spin something and then it moves around, in a centrifugal way, and there is a speed. Okay, this is all law of physics. And then there's the law of seeds, bija niyama. We can call it genetics if you like. This is you plant a mango seed, you get mango plant, and so on. Heredity, human beings bear human children, and so on. And you have the law of karma, number 3. And number 4, how our mind works, mental processes. The human mind works in a certain way. And the last one is the law of phenomena, Dhamma Niyama. So here is this last order or law deals with dependent arising. One of the aspects is independent arising is included here. This is a later commentarial listing of ideas of the universal description. So here, the basic idea behind this conditionality is found in Samyutta Nikaya, for example, Dasabala Sutta 1. It's at the bottom of page 99. Imasming sati idang hoti. When this is, that is. Imasu pada idang upajati. With the rising of this, that arises. Imasming asati idang nahoti. When this is not, that is not. Imasa nirodha idang nirujati. With the ending of this, that ends. So, when there's A, there's B. When A ends, B also ends. Cause effect. So this is a very, very basic, very simple idea of causality, conditionality. Or put into modern logical language, when A is present, B is present. So in other words, when you see smoke, there must be fire, generally speaking. So A arising, B arises. When A is not present, B is not present. A ceasing, B also ceases. So this is called suchness. That's the way things are. And this type of condition does not change. It's always there. And inerrancy, that means if you bring all these conditions together, that's the result you get. You will never fail, in other words. So these things are very sure. Okay. So here, when we talk about the 12 links, in a sense, when talking about ourselves, we're talking about the five aggregates also. So all these things that change are nothing but the five aggregates. Whatever we experience, whether in the past, the present, or in the future, as long as we live, it has to do with the five aggregates. It is form, feeling, perception, formation, consciousness. And if we look at all these five aggregates, form, our body, then the rest are our mind, what sort of conditions do they have? The most basic one is impermanence. Because since everything is conditioned, it also must be impermanent, changing all the time. So when we understand dependent arising, we also understand impermanence. In other words, things change. We can change. Change is, in other words, the natural order of things. And because we can change, that means we can be enlightened. We can be free from suffering also. We have to understand what's going on right now first, right here before us. And not to see those things as permanent, but as changing all the time. In some suttas, in fact in this sutta, an example also, this particular sutta, the ending of it teaches us to overcome 16 kinds of doubts. Or if you like, and putting it another way is, if we don't understand dependent arising, then we start doubting ourselves, we start speculating. These are called the 16 doubts, about ourselves in the present, in the past, and in the future. We look at these 16 doubts in a moment. Okay, this is just an overview. So this is one way of overcoming all these doubts. And when we understand the nature of impermanence, it also means we overcome this idea that this body has got some kind of unchanging, abiding self. We let go of the idea of self-identity. And again, if we understand nature of cause and effect, then we don't rely on luck or good fortune or believe in fatalism, for example. In other words, we won't be attached to vows and rituals. In other words, we understand that our personal development does not depend on something outside of us. Ultimately, we have to do it ourselves, so to speak. It's just that when we are hungry, we have to take the food ourselves. Of course, it doesn't mean we should not have people, right? It doesn't mean we can't get help from people. Of course we can, but remember, ultimately, we have to do it ourselves. It's just like you bring a horse to water, but the horse must want to drink, to rephrase that famous proverb. So these are the first three fetters. So if you break these three fetters, in other words, we do not have self-identity view, we let go of doubts about ourselves in the past, present, future, and we do not get attached to vows and rituals. We don't rely on vows and rituals. We rely on ourselves, understand our minds, train our minds, free our minds. We become streamliness. It's the first stage of sainthood, which every Buddhist should aspire to work for. This is the teaching of the Buddha himself. The Buddha did not teach us to take bodhisattva vows, become bodhisattva, become the Buddha. These are later ideas, which are interesting in themselves, but they're more ideas to talk about and discuss rather than ritual practice. But here, in terms of streamlining, it's the real practice which the Buddha himself has given us. Take, for example, these famous verses from the Bhadikaratta Sutta, which talks about overcoming doubts about ourselves. Let one not go back after the past, nor harbor fond hope for the future. What is past has passed away, and the future has not yet come. The present state as it arises with insight, one sees each of them immovable, unshakable. Having known that, let one be sure of it. Work at the task this very day. Who knows, death will come tomorrow. For there is no bargaining whatsoever with death's great horde. One who dwells thus ardently, relentlessly day and night, he is Bhadikaratta, meaning lucky in a single night of meditation, says the peaceful sage. That's the Buddha, from the Bhadikaratta Sutta. Now, a late sutta called the Nidikanda Sutta, from the Buddhagapata Sutta 8, talks about three kinds of awakenings. It's the awakening of the disciples, Savaka Parami, or the perfection of the disciples. Notice here, Parami is used only for Savakas, for the follower, not used for Buddha or even Arahat. Then there is the personal awakening, Pacceka Bodhi. There's no mention of Pacceka Buddha here, just as Pacceka Bodhi. And then the Buddha plane, that's the Buddha Bhumi. So three kinds of awakening. These are historical ideas. In other words, if you look at the Buddha, okay, first the Buddha comes, he's awakened as the Buddha, then his followers, the Savakas after him, they got enlightened. And there are those, according to ancient stories, single persons who get enlightened but did not make the effort to spread the Dharma. So they're called Pacceka Buddhas. Okay, so this one, the earliest record we have is in Nidikanda Sutta. Here, what does this teaching mean for us? It means, even in times of difficulty, sometimes you find it's difficult to get the right teachings, the proper teachings. You find today it's a Google world. You find you can just Google anything you want, everything's in the books, everything's externalized. Anyone can just learn these things. They hear a speaker say something, they take it, and someone teaches meditation, they drop it, and they put it together, and then if they're good speakers, they give these talks. No one knows what goes on inside the speaker, but he appears to be peaceful, awakened, wise even. But we don't really know what's inside this person. They're not awakened, they're not even free from suffering. They're still filled with the three negative motivational roots. So in other words, it is not wise to rely on anyone for our salvation, no matter how wise they may appear. They can help you up to a certain point. But sooner or later, you have to rely on yourself. You are the least person likely to disappoint yourself. So this is one understanding of Pacceka Bodhi. In other words, work your own salvation. If you think it's difficult to find teachers today, the sutras are still there. Study Pali. With the various translations available today, there are many good translations available. Don't just listen to popular talks. You'll never get enlightened listening to popular talks. So this is where you have to make the effort yourself. Study the sutras, look at the instructions for meditation, go for retreats if you like, if you can. Study properly what are the methods that work well for you. Practice it yourself. Notice your inner peace, build up the inner peace, accept yourself, build up yourself, let go of the negative aspects. And then you find in time that wisdom arising in you, you're at peace with yourself. So this dependent arising in this sutta gives us a summary of all these principles going on, how we arise and pass away. And this is the element of the principle, the dhatu, that underlies everything in this world. If you understand this, then you also understand impermanence. If you understand impermanence, you're also able to see this series of conditions. Here is where we can once again look at this very famous 3 lines from the Dhammapada 277 to 279. We have 3 famous, the 3 characteristic formula. You have Sabbe Sankhara Anicca, Sabbe Sankhara Dukkha, and then something different, Sabbe Dhamma Anatta. It's on page 105. 105. Sabbe Sankhara Anicca, all conditioned phenomena, or all things in this universe are impermanent. Sabbe Sankhara Dukkha, all conditioned phenomena are suffering. Sabbe Dhamma Anatta. Okay, here we have a problem, because some scholar monks translate Dhamma as all things, including Nirvana. And some of the teachers who studied the suttas well, they said it's the wrong translation. Here Dhamma refers to the principles underlying all these things that's going on around us. But from my own understanding, I feel that we can also include the previous states also. In other words, the conditioned phenomena as well as the principle. The Dhamma is a very broad term. So that's a bit of difference, which I notice anyway. So this is just observation, a bit of philosophical fact even. And I need to worry too much. If you disagree with me, it's okay. Just accept whichever opinion you think works for you, use it. The important thing is when you meditate, let go of all these ideas and be at peace with yourself. So you look, if you're interested in these 3 lines, look at page 105, and then the broader meaning given on page 107. And for a summary of the 12 links in this sutta, you can see the diagram on page 105, beginning with birth, which leads to decay and death, and then existence, which leads to birth, and so on. So it kind of it goes backwards. And so this is a cycle of links, like a chain. So theoretically speaking, if it's a chain, you can break the chain anywhere to be free. But it's not that simple, because everything is going so fast. But there is a weak point or two here. And in meditation, we notice, especially when feelings arise, you just accept the feelings as they are, don't get caught up with them. Then you do not create karma, new bad karma. So stop at feeling, don't let it lead to craving. And then as you progress in your meditation, you build up wisdom, and that's when you uproot ignorance in due course. So here is where One way is to see the rise and fall of all events when you meditate. Notice all the impermanence of it. So there are different ways of translating the Pali of this text. Look at page 106. If we translate the traditional way, we can translate it as conditioned by birth, decay and death. There's no verb there. Okay? You can say conditioned by birth, there is decay and death if you like. If you want the idiomatic English translation, in other words it sounds easier in English, decay and death is conditioned by birth. But here's a passive structure, passive construction. More simply, if you want to use the active voice, you can say birth is conditioned by decay and death, which sounds simpler. But then when you read through all the other lines, it's very difficult to connect them. Let me read to you again. First, look at page 105. Birth leads to, the arrow means leads to or conditions, decay and death. Then existence decays, existence conditions birth. Or existence leads to birth, if you like. But birth is mentioned last, only visually you connect with the first. So it's a bit difficult to follow. Whereas if you look at the idiomatic translation back on page 106, decay and death is conditioned by birth, birth is conditioned by existence, existence is conditioned by clinging, and so on. So you find it very easy to connect. The last word leads to the next first word, and so on. So this is why the idiomatic translation is much easier on our ear. So that's by way of introduction. Now, so let's look at the sutta now. So this sutta is one of those reflective sutta. In other words, one way is to tape it and then listen by way of reflection. Yes, read it mindfully and then listen to it. Even more dramatic sutta is called a Kajaniya Sutta, which we'll be studying next week in Komesu. Kajaniya Sutta, which talks about how we are eaten up by the fire aggregates, so to speak. Kajaniya means that which is eaten up or swallowed. Here is a simpler version of reflecting on the 12 links. Page 107. While reciting a Savatthi, so here the Buddha is staying there, he says, Bhikshus, I will teach you dependent arising and dependently arisen phenomena. So you have two words there. Paticca samuppada. And then paticca samuppanna dhamma. So the principles and the application. The principle and the application. This is what I mean, you see, by the word dhamma applies to both. And then the monks answer, so the Buddha says, listen, pay close attention, I will speak. So the Buddha is preparing the audience. And the monks respond, yes, Bhante. The monks reply to the Blessed One in essence. The Blessed One said this. And what bhikshus is dependent arising. Okay, so this is the first part. Notice it lasts up to page 109, sections 1 to 5. So this is first, the 12 links are defined. And what bhikshu is dependent arising? Decay and death bhikshus are conditioned by birth. Jati pachaya bhikkhave jara maranam. Whether there is the arising of Tathagatas, Buddhas thus come, or no arising of Tathagatas, this element stands as the fixity of things, the order of things, a specific conditionality. Decay and death are conditioned by birth. In other words, we change and changes end in death because we are born. Yes, you can't change this. It's a fixed universal idea. We don't call this a dogma because the Buddha didn't invent this idea. There's a big difference because the way the words are used sounds like a dogma. can't challenge it. You can challenge it, but you find you can't disprove it. The Tathagata awakens to this and realizes it. Okay, so this states the fact that Buddha understands this. If the Buddha can understand this, we also can understand this. Having awakened to it, having realized it, he tells, teaches, proclaims, establishes, reveals, analyzes, and clarifies it to us. Clarifies it thus, saying, see, this is the shortest sentence, only one verb in all religious literature. See, passatta. Decay and death bhikshus is conditioned by birth, right? So the link is repeated again. Then birth bhikshus is conditioned by existence. Bhava pacaya bhikkhave jati. Whether there is a rising of the Tathagatas or no rising of the Tathagatas, this element stands as the fixity of things, the order of things, a specific conditionality. So in other words, again, everything is repeated here. This fact, birth is conditioned by existence, is the way things are, whether Buddhas arise or not. But when the Buddha realizes it and he declares it to us. And then the third link, existence bhikshus is conditioned by clinging. And then again, it's a universal law, whether Buddhas arise or not, when the Buddha realizes it, teaches it to us. Link number 4, clinging bhikshus is conditioned by craving. There is craving. Craving leads to clinging. Craving is a mental idea, we want something, and then when you got it, you hold on to it. This is a universal principle. The Buddha realizes it, teaches it to us. Then link number 5, craving bhikshus is conditioned by feeling. So how does craving arise? Because we have feelings, right? So we have feel something nice and we want more of that. Again, this is a universal law, whether Buddha exists or not. The Buddha realizes it, declares it to us for our benefit. Notice there's no threat here, no hellfire, and kind of purely wisdom, very compassionate of the Buddha to teach it to us. Very gentle teaching. Link number 6, feeling bhikshus is conditioned by contact. Right? Contact refers to sense, experience. The senses working, seeing, smelling, tasting, and so on. Again, the Buddha realizes this. 7, contact bhikshus is conditioned by the 6 sense bases. The 6 senses. And the 6 senses experience or collect data from outside. That's called contact. This is a universal principle. Buddha did not invent it, but he realizes it and tells it, teaches it to us. Number 8. The 6 sense bases bhikshus are conditioned by name and form. Nama rupa. This is a universal principle again. Name and form. Mind, the object, if you like, the thing. But when we see something, we objectify it. When we experience something with the mind, we see it as either light shapes of seeing, or we define it as smell, taste, touch, and so on. This is easy to understand if you look at a baby. The baby is born, doesn't distinguish any of the senses. And slowly as the baby evolves, as we evolve, as we mature, we begin to distinguish the different senses, right? Through name and form. Through looking at things and giving names to them. We hear a sound and then our parents keep telling us, okay, nice sound, whatever sound. Smells, taste, and so on. All are given names. And that's how our senses arise. 9, name and form bhikshus are conditioned by consciousness. So how do we experience all these things? Because we have consciousness. And then what about consciousness? How is it conditioned? 10, consciousness conditioned by volitional formations. So this is like karma. karma from the past acting on us and feeding this consciousness. Consciousness here is a basic awareness of what goes on around us. So this volitional formation is our like fuel, karmic energy pushing us on. 11. Volitional formation bhikshus are conditioned by ignorance. Right? So we go on getting caught up in this cycle because we don't know what's going on. So we just follow the flow of our karma. And then the 12th link. Actually you count together, there are 11 links, but the names are 12 of them. Right? Okay, so this is the principle, and then the events, the phenomena, the actual happening that we need to reflect on. 6.1. In what bhikshus are dependently arisen phenomena? Decay and death bhikshus is impermanent, conditioned, dependently arisen, subject to destruction, subject to passing away, subject to fading away, subject to ceasing. Right? So, a single important fact. This is impermanent. This is the law of change. Birth, bhikshus, is impermanent, conditioned, dependently arisen, subject to destruction, subject to passing away, subject to fading, subject to ceasing. Existence, bhikshus, is impermanent, conditioned, dependently arisen, subject to destruction, subject to passing away, subject to fading away, subject to ceasing. Clinging, bhikshus, is impermanent, conditioned, dependently arisen, subject to destruction, subject to passing away, subject to fading away, subject to ceasing. Craving, bhikshus, is impermanent, conditioned, dependently arisen, subject to destruction, subject to passing away, subject to fading away, subject to ceasing. Feeling, bhikshus, is impermanent, conditioned, dependently arisen, subject to destruction, subject to passing away, subject to fading away, subject to ceasing. Contact, bhikshus, is impermanent, conditioned, dependently arisen, subject to destruction, subject to passing away, subject to fading away, subject to ceasing. Six sense bases, bhikshus, are impermanent, conditioned, dependently arisen, subject to destruction, subject to passing away, subject to fading away, subject to ceasing. Name and form, bhikshus, are impermanent, conditioned, dependently arisen, subject to destruction, subject to passing away, subject to fading away, subject to ceasing. Consciousness, bhikshus, is impermanent, conditioned, dependently arisen, subject to destruction, subject to passing away, subject to fading away, subject to ceasing. Volitional formations, bhikshus, are impermanent, conditioned, dependently arisen, subject to destruction, subject to passing away, subject to fading away, subject to ceasing. Ignorance, bhikshus, is impermanent, conditioned, dependently arisen, subject to destruction, subject to passing away, subject to fading away, subject to ceasing. Each of the 12 links are mentioned in this way. This is very important because we are reminded all these links are impermanent. So notice in Buddhism we never say, oh, you practice this, then you will live forever, eternal life. But these are meaningless statements. Eternity, this is one of the wrong views that prevents us from getting out of suffering. Because all these negative states, all these things that attend to our lives, define our lives, they're impermanent. And once you understand that, you find then suffering is just a part of it. We understand this, we can let go of suffering more easily. How is it applied? That comes the next section. 16 doubts removed. And if you remove the 16 doubts, you attain streaming. 18.1. Bhikshus, when a noble disciple has clearly seen as they really are with right wisdom, these dependent arising and these dependently arisen phenomena, that he would ever run back to the past thinking, now was I in the past, now was I not in the past, now what was I in the past? How was I in the past? Now, having been, what did I become in the past? This is impossible. Okay, the sentence structure is a bit long. You need to be careful. Because this is oral tradition being chanted. Huh? Okay, so if we paraphrase this, simplify this, we will never worry about the past thinking, what was I in the past? Was I famous? What was I not in the past? Right? This is opposite. Huh? Was I, maybe I was not famous in the past, something like that. Maybe I was not rich in the past. Now, what was I in the past? This is another doubt. We're not certain. How was I in the past? Right? In other words, what sort of conditions did I live in, for example? What kind of pleasures I had? Now, having been what, did I become what in the past? So here, like thinking of a cause effect. Maybe I was poor and became rich, or I was rich and became poor, something like that. So, in other words, these things don't worry us anymore. If you understand the nature of dependent arising, you understand conditionality, you let go of the past. These are 5 kinds of worries we tend to have about the past. What about the future? 19.1. All that he would ever run up into the future, thinking, now will I be in the future? Now will I not be in the future? Now what will I be in the future? Now how will I be in the future? Now having been what, will I become what in the future? This is impossible, right? So we won't start wondering about the future, what's going to happen. We just take things as they come. So this is 5 more. And then in the present you have 6. 5, 5, 6. So totaling how many? 16. All that he would now be in doubt within himself about the present, thinking, now am I? Now am I not? Now what am I? Now how am I? Where now has this being come from? Where now will this being go? So in other words, what happens after death? This all won't trouble us. What is the reason for this? Because bhikshus and noble disciples clearly seen as they really are with right wisdom, this dependent arising and this dependently arisen phenomena. Okay? In other words, we understand the principles behind dependent arising and that they're all impermanent. So this is the reflection you have to understand. There are 2 key ideas here. One is the deconditionality, the other is impermanence. So, if you are able to understand all these dependent arising and reflect on impermanence, you clear away doubt. You become a streamliner. In the Kajanya Sutta, you find if you have this understanding, you become a streamliner, and then when you totally clear all ideas, all views, you become an arhat. So this is a sutta for reflection. Yeah? If you like, you can rewind the tape and then open your book and then read together from section 4 onwards, all those verses. Yeah? Or you can even tape it yourself with the audio tape and then listen to them by your reflection and then go to your meditation. For all this, when you listen to all these readings, you feel calm and peaceful. You have to let go of your ideas. And then you can meditate. So choose your favorite passages. Sometimes we call it Sutta Puja. Okay, so any questions here? Okay,
So the yogi needs to meditate to understand it.
yes. Here the idea is to first reflect, okay? Even we're not meditating, we can reflect on all these teachings. In other words, you've got to know the words first, understand the passages, make sure the words flow nicely. So this is the first level of learning, word level. We just look at the words, try to understand the words, make sure you understand the ideas. And then second level, you kind of, when you reflect on them, you can see the flow of the ideas. You say, yes, this is true, everything around us is covered, is explained by this law, impermanence, for example. And then you feel peaceful, you say, okay, there's nothing more to think about really, nothing to doubt, nothing to worry, all the 16 possible worries are all gone, and there's nothing to do but meditate, like that. See? So in other words, of course, when you're meditating, you let go of the ideas. So this is like a ladder, you climb up, meditation's up there, you climb up. Then once you're up there, you don't need a ladder anymore. So we don't think about this in meditation. However, when you come out of your meditation, you're so peaceful. You may have realization and say, wow, now I understand this deeper. Okay? And you begin to see the connections. So this is where the peacefulness of the mind and the joy of the mind makes you feel so clear, you begin to see deeper into this truth. Meaning you are able to connect them more completely together. That's called realization of some level. So notice how here you have different kinds of wisdom. Wisdom of learning, wisdom of thinking, and then meditation wisdom. Okay, so we build it up gradually like that. Each of these wisdom is not learning more and more. Each of these wisdom is learning to let go, learning to let go. Okay? And in the end, you're so peaceful, no more burden, in other words.
So of all the 12 things, which one is the easiest to break?
Of all the 12 things, is it? Well, I would say it depends. In your meditation, the easiest is to deal with feelings. When feelings arise, reflect on them as impermanent. Do not follow up on the feelings. Don't say, wow, this is nice, I want more of this. Then you create karma. See? So the feeling aspect. Okay? Ultimately, of course, you have to get rid of ignorance. Ultimately. So you have two sides of the chain. One is the feeling, which is easier. You can temporarily break it at least in meditation. And then finally, with wisdom, you remove ignorance. The one is a long-term one. So the short-term one and the long-term one. Short-term, deal with feelings. Pleasant feelings arise, fine, they're permanent, smile at it. Unpleasant feeling arise, okay, smile also, it's impermanent, right? Neutral feeling arise, reflect on it, it's impermanent. Okay. So that occurs in our daily life. And then ultimately you build up this wisdom, and then you uproot the ignorance bit by bit. If you can uproot the ignorance totally, then of course you become an arahant. Any other question?
When Ananda said that this depending on imagination is not difficult to understand, then Buddha said no, it is very deep. Why did the Buddha say that?
Well, do you understand?
So,
do you understand yourself totally, dependent arising? We have some rough idea, but it's quite deep. Ananda is so inspired, so happy. He said, wow, now I understand. A lot of us are like that, Sometimes we read a book, we say, oh yeah, I've understood everything. But anyone who's wiser will say, oh, this person doesn't really know. He's just very happy, very excited by the fact that he understands certain things about the Dharma. And we seem to know everything about ourselves, but then later we found out, oh, there's so many things we still don't know about ourselves. It's like a child's excitement on seeing a toy shop from the outside. Say, wow, and then we discover more and more truth after that. So what the Buddha is saying, don't get too hasty with it. I mean, yes, you might think it's easy, but it is not really so. Okay? So it's good to remember this story of Ananda. In other words, don't be too sure about ourselves. Sometimes some teachers they say, oh, I got enlightened now. Oh, I know everything now, Well, what do you mean everything? What is everything? Everything about your mind, maybe, perhaps. But then, what is your mind? Our mind is so full of craving and ignorance. So we may know certain things, and then it leads on to other things. And it makes us feel happy, compassionate in the real sense of the word, not just talking about it. We're able to actually act out the compassion. In fact, nowadays we find compassion is too much talked about. Compassion is something we do, not talk about. Yeah, of course, if you act in terms of like counseling people, giving them the joy and calmness in themselves, that is an action too. We don't just talk about compassion and don't do anything about it. That would be quite ironic. Okay, anything else?
Okay, one question.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Is this the essential of Buddhism? Depending on
Well, you can say that.
the most important one?
To me, the most important teaching in Buddhism is impermanence.
Impermanence.
The simplest impermanence. Because if you understand impermanence, you find this principle in the travelings, which is actually the most profound. And then in the Five Aggregates, Four Noble Truths, you find impermanence is found in all the teachings. So if you ask me what is the most basic teaching of the Buddha, I would say impermanence. Not suffering.
Maybe three characteristics. Or just only impermanence.
Impermanence only. Because in impermanence, you find it leads to all the other teachings. So if you ask me what is it you need to remember most, I would say impermanence. What we need to reflect most is impermanence. That's the key teaching. Because if you reflect on that, it leads to true meaning also. Right? You can reflect on suffering, but it's difficult. You might feel negative about it. So there's a way of doing all these things properly if you understand impermanence. Traveling is a bit complicated. You need to really know all the steps, and you might think, oh yeah, I understand everything, and that the false knowledge might even prevent you from going further. Whereas impermanence is different. Impermanence, you go on looking, you go on reflecting, and you build up this awareness. You're cleaning the lenses of your mind. You begin to see more and more clearly. So in a sense, I would say the travelings is more a matter of realization. You can't think about travelings. You have to observe, and then connect them. So impermanence is the easiest practice. I would say it's the main practice for a lay person. In fact, for anyone who wants to be a Buddhist, even monks and nuns. Okay, on that note, we end this study. Right, today we have reflected on the Jatipachaya Sutta, the 12 links in reverse. We also reflected on impermanence, how it pervades through all the 12 links by way of rise and fall. And that the 12 links are always there, whether Buddhas arise or not, but the Buddhas understand this fully and teaches them to us in different ways, out of great compassion, with their wisdom. And now it is our turn to make an effort to study, practice and realize the nature of the 12 links, the expressions of the 12 links. And if we find this difficult, then let us reflect on impermanence regularly. And if we do this, then we can attain true meaning in this life itself, which should be the aspiration of all true Buddhists. Reflecting in this way, this wonderful good karma, by the power of such good karma, may our minds quickly focus when we meditate. May we be at peace in all times. May we be happy in this life itself. Above all, by the power of all this wonderful good karma, and by our faith in the three jewels, by our practice of generosity and keeping the precepts, studying the Dharma, may we attain true meaning in this life itself. In this moment of peace, let us send out our loving kindness to all our friends and relatives, our teachers, and to those whom the Dharma have not touched, that they may come closer to the Dharma and awaken to it. May beings be well and happy.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.